Good morning and welcome to the Wilson Center. We are congressionally chartered as a living memorial to Woodrow Wilson, and that means we are scholarship-driven and fiercely nonpartisan. Today's event is looking at one of the global issues that we in the Global Europe program are interested in, and that is sanctions. We are fortunate to have with us today representatives of the Cyprus banking sector, because what we are looking at is how countries can implement the sanctions that have been imposed in the aftermath of Russia's war in Ukraine, but also more broadly. That is a big challenge, and it's something that we in the Global Europe program are looking at very closely. So with that, I want to get started. What will happen is this. We'll have a presentation by our experts. We will then open it up to questions both in the room and online. And then with that, we will have what I hope will be a vibrant discussion about this sector. Very briefly, I'm going to introduce our guests. They are Mario Skandalis, who is Chief Compliance Officer of the Bank of Cyprus Group. Mr. Skandalis is president of the Cyprus Integrity Forum, the largest non-governmental organization in Cyprus for combating corruption and promoting transparency. He is also vice president and a founder member of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners in Cyprus. What particularly impressed me, I have to say, is that he keeps winning awards for all of his work. He is the winner of the 2016 Banker of the Year Award in Cyprus by AI Magazine in the United Kingdom, and he is also a Silver Award winner of the Best Compliance Team by the International Compliance Association in the UK. So welcome and thank you for joining us. Next, we have Maria Aristidou Dimitriou, and she is the Chief Compliance Officer of the Hellenic Bank Cyprus Ltd. She has been working for over 25 years in the accounting and banking industry. She is previously a member of the Compliance Committee of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Cyprus and participated in the first national risk assessment exercise carried out by the Central Bank of Cyprus with the assistance of the World Bank. George Apostolidis is the head of compliance and the anti-money laundering compliance officer at Eurobank Cyprus. Sorry, it took me a minute to translate the acronym, forgive me. Mr. Apostolidis also participated in the latest evaluation of Cyprus by Monival. He has also participated in other evaluations conducted by the European Commission concerning anti-money laundering and the combating of financing of terrorism. So plenty of experience to bring to that. And finally, Simeon Simiou is the head of compliance and also anti-money laundering at Astrobank Public Company Limited. He started his banking career in 1984 and with moving to Hellenic Bank Investments. From 2004 to 2007, he worked in the Moscow representative office of Hellenic Bank PLC, where he held the position of Chief Representative Officer. So what we have brought here is a panel of experts who have worked on these issues for years, together trying to combat corruption and to look at sanctions compliance. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to our panel for a presentation. We hope that those of you who are participating online also have the opportunity to see this slide presentation, and we are also modeling it here in the room. So with that, I'm turning it over to our panel of four.
Thank you, Robin, for this nice introduction. And thank you all for being here and showing interest in our story. I'm sure that you've heard about Cyprus before, but we think that it's best if we give you some background information on the economics and the products and the risks that we face, and which are the reasons who brought us here today to share with you our story on how we managed to survive the crisis of 2013 and reaching the current situation. Well, Cyprus is a small island in the Mediterranean Sea with a population of 1.5 million. So a small island like that, why should should it be an interest to anyone. So Cyprus has been an international hub for over many years, with the product mainly being the financial services. We've got other products like tourism and recently ESG products, investments, and the education industry as well is one of our main activities, and also tourism. So our investments grew big over the last 20 years because mainly of our position of our geopolitical position, the nice weather, the transparent but yet attractive tax regime. Our current corporate tax is at 12.5%, and also our strong legal framework and the professional services available on the island, for example, accounting, legal, and tax. So all this together makes the island an attractive investment hub for many. So over the years, there was overexposure in the Russian population and the CIS countries, which was one of the reasons that led to the failure of our compliance program in 2013 and the economic failure of Cyprus, along with our overexposure in Greek bonds. So after that, we managed to introduce various reforms, and reaching today into a prosperous economy of a GDP of 2.7%, well above the EU average of 0.6%. Our unemployment rate is at 5.7%, well below the EU average of 6.5%, and our inflation fluctuates between 2 to 3%, slightly below the EU average. At one time, our banking size was 8 times our GDP, but currently it has been reduced to 3 times our GDP. So the financial crisis of 2013, as I said before, make us realize that we have been overexposed, and various reforms had to be put in place. So the risks identified related to our overexposure on Russia and CIS countries, our over-reliance on due diligence carried out by third parties, and the lack of effective compliance competency. So our reforms now relate to best international standards which have been adopted, a new, stronger regulatory framework, deleveraging and de-risking, full commitment for adherence to sanctions. We abide by EU, UK, UN, and US sanctions. We made significant investment in training and also in resources. The number of compliance personnel tripled over the last years, and also our investment for new technologies doubled. Also, we have some initiatives and reforms by the government. All these will be covered by my colleagues in a while. So with regards to regulatory reforms, these are continuously being enhanced. Mainly, efforts are targeted to transparency through abiding by EU regulations like CRS, DAC 6, but also FATCA. We have committed in complying with FATCA. And recently, CSOP, which tries to tackle VAT fraud. Furthermore, we have introduced the UBO's registry, whereby all companies are obliged to record their UBOs in the company's registrar, and also trusts, and all parties with a legitimate interest have access to this UBO registry. Also, the Central Bank of Cyprus is issuing various directives aligning the requirements with the various EU regulations and directives. The current directive is now being revised again, and it's in the phase of consultation. So we are on constant reformation, and our visits to the United States aim primarily to share with you our efforts and our current situation, but also get feedback from you to help us improve even further. So Marios, can you please go ahead with the analysis of the reforms?
So basically, first of all, I would like to thank you for having us over here. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to share with you our story and, of course, the relevant updates that led us 10 years after the banking crisis where we are today. So, like my colleague Maria has just mentioned, there has been a banking crisis back in 2013, leading to the shutting down of the second largest bank of the island and the largest bank of the island, having its depositors going through a bail-in process with a haircut of nearly 50% of their deposits. Therefore, given this kind of immense development, that couldn't be remedied with just a few corrective measures or a few kind of policy enhancements. There had to be a major overhaul, an overall revamping of the whole operation of the banking industry. And actually, that was a blessing for Cyprus. It wasn't a curse like many call it, but a blessing because it helped us realize that we were on a crossroad of survival and extinction. And that is why we have chosen to undertake the path for survival. And we have not just survived, but we have actually excelled. And how have we addressed the crisis and the situation that we had to deal with then? With zero trust by any of our stakeholders, with, as I said, having two banks, basically one in administration and the other shutting down. We, the compliance community and function of the banking industry, have taken a strategic approach under 5 key main pillars, and we have introduced measures under each of those 5 strategic pillars in order and to remedy the situation, but at the same time to enable the banking industry in Cyprus to operate in a sustainable manner and actually not just operating within a kind of complex market, a kind of challenging market in the southeastern part of the Europe and the Middle East, but be a leading financial services center. So the first strategic pillar that we have addressed was that of building an effective compliance structure. And in doing so, we have made sure that, like my colleague Maria said, tripled the number of resources, bringing more skillful resources in, and also changing the overall governance around the compliance profession. And that is why the compliance function as it is today is a fully independent profession, reporting directly to the board of directors of each bank and having nothing to do with the management of the bank. The second strategic pillar that we have been tackling was this of strengthening the regulatory and the policy framework. My colleague has just mentioned a few of the regulatory frameworks and the regulators that have been enhanced. One very, very important enhancement, and please allow me to go into a bit of a further compliance technicalities and some more details that may be more of a technical aspect. For example, the definition of the ultimate beneficial owners. This has been a crucial matter because we needed to basically enhance that area. And what we have done is that we have not just fully adhered in identifying the relevant ultimate beneficial owner of any relationship that would be commencing, but actually we have taken further steps ahead, something which has actually been recognized by the Financial Services Committee of the Congress numerous times, and that is that apart from getting that physical person behind each relationship, we made sure to be introducing measures to confirm the validity of what has been given to us, and one of the unique measures that have been introduced in Europe to actually have a physical face-to-face meeting with that person prior to the inception of the relationship. Another measure was that has been introduced by the regulator was the definition of what constitutes shell company activity and what constitutes non-transparent shell company activity, something which, again, segregates Cyprus from any other jurisdictions. And I'm saying this with full confidence of knowing exactly that today Cyprus, as it stands, is probably the only jurisdiction with such a clear definition of what constitutes a non-transparent shell company activity, and with clear instructions within the regulatory framework, the AML directive, of what needs to be done if such a relationship exists, which is to terminate the relationship. Also, we had a number of new restricted categories in our customer acceptance policy. We do not facilitate any organizations dealing in arms. We do not facilitate any organizations dealing in virtual currencies. Also, we do not facilitate any organizations dealing in unregulated casino or online gambling. These are just a few of the areas and categories that we do not do that. Moreover, we have made sure to eliminate any compliance reliance on professional intermediaries, the administrative service providers, or the accountants and lawyers that were running around bringing clients within the system of Cyprus. So there's no any more compliance relationship on this, and also we have made sure that this channel of distribution of business within the system is not an important anymore, and that is why there has been a decrease of 80% since year 2014 until today in the operation of such professionals within the market. My colleague has mentioned adherence to the EU and UN sanctions, which is our obligatory responsibility, but on top of that, we have made sure to adhere and to the US and to the UK sanctions issued by the OFAC and the OFSI respectively. Although that bears a huge legal risk for us, because since we are not obligated to do that, if we freeze the assets of any such designated national, obviously we are facing large risks, legal risks. However, we knew that the risk of losing the trust of our stakeholders, especially the US ones, was far higher to be taken. Therefore, we decided to voluntarily take that risk. These strict measures also were not strict across the board. They were focused on certain high-risk jurisdictions. Obviously, Russia, Belarus, and the former CIS countries were our main focus, and that paid off. We had, since year 2014, more than 160,000 accounts shut down because of compliance reasons. The exposure to Russians has been is totally insignificant today. From 10% back in 2014, we have today an exposure of 1.20%, 1.50%, something which is very insignificant number, but at the same time, we know exactly what that 1.5% represents, which is basically certain retirees, Russians that have always been residing in Cyprus. Zero activity, zero facilitation of any activity in the Russia or Belarus. Also, I would like to mention the recent review that has been taken by our regulators on our systems, and to ensure the effectiveness and the efficiency of our real-time monitoring systems as they operate today it is there, and also to ensure that a good balance is kept between the effectiveness and the efficiencies of those systems. The third strategic pillar on which we have operated is that of improving transparency and international collaboration. Obviously, the reason we are here today is to strengthen this collaboration. We have built an open channel of communication with our US but also European stakeholders. We are the only industry that has done that. This is something that the government is actually considering of initiating at the moment for other sectors of the financial services industry as well. And this has also brought significant increase in the collaboration with, especially with US correspondent banks. Currently, we're having 5 US dollar clearing banks offering services to the financial institutions in Cyprus. The fourth strategic pillar that we have followed is that of enhanced monitoring and assurance. We have very sophisticated systems at the moment in all financial institutions in Cyprus that allow real-time monitoring of all inward and outward transactions taking place. We also have filtering all of our client portfolios against such financial crime lists and negative media on a daily basis. We have implemented trade-based money laundering applications and systems where we monitor the all and filter all prohibited and dual-use goods, as well as sanctioned vessels and sanctioned ports on a real-time basis. And we have been, as one of my colleagues will further develop, we have been extending all these restrictions that we have applied for Russia and Belarus on nearby friendly jurisdictions, because that is the area of more focus now. But you'll be hearing more later on from my colleagues on that. And lastly, the fifth strategic pillar that we have been introducing remediation measures is that of building a compliance-focused culture and awareness. We have exponentially increased the trainings taking place within our banks in terms of compliance. That includes training of the board of directors and everybody that sees all these ongoing trainings. They also see an aptitude test at the end to ensure that they have not just read but actually comprehended the content of the training taking place. Also, Cyprus is today delivering the largest European compliance event, the International Compliance Forum in Cyprus, where every year there is a sound participation from US stakeholders. We have people, senior representatives of the Treasury Department, of the Commerce Department, of the State Department participating as panelists and speakers to this large European event taking place. Also, there has been a practical commitment of the government, given these initiatives that have been taken by the banking sector. The government could not just stay silent. Therefore, they came at the forefront because actually this has taken place after the April 2023 designations, which included a number of Cypriot professionals as well. And the Cyprus banking sector has been the only sector of the economy that came forward and they said, yes, we are going to be fully complying with these designations, whilst lawyers and accountants, they were a bit hesitant. And that was the time that the actual president of the Republic of Cyprus stepped at the front, and he said he has actually introduced a number of specific measures. It was actually 8 initiatives that I'm going to be later on referring to ensure that the banking sector is not going to be left alone giving its own fight, but the whole of the country would have joined this effort. And lastly, there has been a lot of initiatives that have been taking place in order to promote the right culture and in order to set the banking sector and, of course, the whole of the financial services industry of Cyprus at the forefront. What we aspire to be as one of the most important parts of the financial services sector and the economy of Cyprus is for us to always be proactive, for us to always demonstrate a high level of transparency in order to ensure that this reflects positively on the overall reputation of the country. And that is why with our work and with with the results of the work that we have performed, we have actually injected the rest of the sectors of the economy of Cyprus. And in this way, we are proud to say today and state today that yes, we are the shield for the reputation of the whole country. So I'd like now to ask from my colleague George to navigate us through the what I've mentioned before, basically the add-on measures that have been taken over the last couple of years with the escalation of the war in Ukraine, but also where the focus is now when it comes to the banking sector of the already remediated banking sector of Cyprus. George.
Thank you, Marios. Glad to be here, and thank you for having us. I was speaking a lot, making some small debriefing of the significant developments and challenges we had to face as to implementing the sanctions imposed against the war of Ukraine. We shall say that the new sanction packages were quite complex in terms of understanding. However, due to our strong governance framework applied, policies, procedures, and controls that we have embedded over the years, we have managed to overcome these complexities. In Europe, we are currently standing at the 14th package. The number of packages used so far include asset freezes, import control prohibitions, deposit restrictions, a quite strong measure imposed by the European Union to restrict inflows of Russians to banks in Europe, and further than that, we are also following the programs issued by OFAC, BIS, and OFSI at the same time. We are seeing the third-party designations evident for countries outside Russia. We have seen a lot of Hong Kong lately in the recent designations. So we understand that the networks are there, they are quite complex, and therefore it is to identify and mitigate the risks that are out there and are unknown. FinCEN has issued a report last year which also included, at a lesser extent, Cyprus, indicating the countries where we are seeing as part of the overall chain for involvement in transactions and exportations of goods to Russia. Cyprus was there, but at a lesser extent, and as a matter of fact, we don't see any significant financial flows coming through Cyprus institutions in part of exporting of goods to Russia. In terms of the executive order that was lately issued in December, 14114, we will say that Cyprus banks were ready well before the issuance to apply these measures, primarily due to the strong customer acceptance policy prohibitions we have on arms and defense industry. And the other part that we are already applying the prohibition for directly or indirectly transacting with OFAC UK, with OFAC sanction entities. Therefore, the implementation was rather easy for us, and at the same time, we see it as a blessing to, let's say, see the OFAC programs being more enforceable in third countries, just because giving the ability to cut off financial institutions, third country financial institution lines from the corresponding banking. We are closely following on the BIS policies and circulars. As said before, we are seeing as a trend that China, Hong Kong, Turkey being on the forefront of dual-use trading in terms of financial flows associated with that typologies. And as I said before, we don't see Cyprus being involved in such transactions. Emphasis is also placed in the high priority list of BIS, and we are implemented in practice the set measures. In terms of the immediate response we are doing to apply these geopolitical challenges, our risk appetite has been immediately updated, and together that caused termination of accounts. In terms of additional categories that have been included were Russian, Belarusian politically exposed persons, entities under sectorial sanction, not as the end themselves, clients under the EU deposit restrictive measures, but also clients with economic activity in Russia and industries that, let's say, had a significant risk are not included in white list of banks that could be facilitated, let's say, for humanitarian reasons. In terms of refinement of controls, we have implemented, as Mario said before, we are implementing automated trade-based money laundering systems where we filter against dual-use products, but also we use from global dataset providers, like, for example, WorldCheck, some key WorldCheck lists where we screen against sanctioned vessels which are used for dark activity or to associated with sanctioned persons and entities. We are filtering the wire transfers related to Russia, Belarus, and the occupied parts of Ukraine. Thematic reviews are conducted on particular areas where we see increased risk to ensure the robustness of controls. And we are restricting the processing of transactions with friendly countries like Russia, and prohibition of transactions that may be associated with dual-use transactions. We are fully adhering the US and UK sanctions, even the nexus is not present. As I said, the new executive order make it a lot more transparent, the measures we have to implement. We are reperforming sanction risk assessment where we see new trends, particularly when we read the US Treasury designations. Now in the way the designations are presented, which give a lot of, let's say, information about the reasons that they are designated nationals, we exploit that information to perform thematic risk assessments to ensure that any kind of possible relationship within our portfolios is terminated. There is strategic collaboration with specialized firms for technical analysis and implementation and legal risk review of the various sanctions issued. Training is continuously delivered to staff to educate them. But as Mario said before, there is close collaboration with the US Department, Treasury, and Justice Department. Lately, last week, we had a training delivered by the US Embassy to the Cyprus financial institutions. And also, the US State Department is also delivering directly training to the board of directors of Cyprus banks. Last, let's say that the Middle East crisis is not, we are not indifferent of what is going on. We are focusing on ensuring mitigation of risks. Arms proliferation is not accepted, as said before, as an industry in the banking sector. The NGOs, which we have seen as being one of the strategic deficiencies in terms of this Middle East conflict, are outside the appetite of Cyprus banks. We have increased the country risk level of Palestine and Lebanon to closely monitor transactions associated with those jurisdictions, and we are enhancing continuously the filtering system to stop and check transactions associated with those countries. I think at this point, Marios can continue in debriefing us a bit on the Cyprus, on the measures taken by the Cyprus government, as further enhancing the governance framework of Cyprus, not only from the banking sector, but also the government sector.
Yes, thank you very much, George.
If I can just interrupt to say that I want to leave a little time for questions and
of
so
course.
forth.
Yes.
So we will, I'm going to give you the remaining part of this 10 minutes or so, and then
Yes,
we will
of course.
leave.
We'll be very brief, but it is important to note exactly that the actual government of the Republic, because it is for the first time ever that they stepped in order to support this effort. And out of these 8 measures that have been introduced, basically these have been announced in year 2023. There has been significant progress on everything. We're talking about measures for enhancing the various regulatory frameworks, measures of building a private-public partnership for the exchange of information between the law enforcement agencies and the private sector. And on this, stakeholders of the US have actually helped our government in order to implement it. But the 2 most important measures is firstly the enhancement of the composition and powers of the Sanctions Enforcement Unit, which is under the Ministry of Finance, in order to have the right stuff in place and at the same time to be given additional rights even to issue, for Cyprus to issue its own sanctions. This for us is a key because it basically solves the problem for us for adhering to US sanctions, because this unit can easily issue its own sanctions that are fully aligned and with the US and with the UK ones, and thus for us to be legally on the right side as well. And the second most important initiative is that related to the setup of an independent unified authority for the AML supervision of all administrative service providers, irrespective of whether they are accountants, lawyers, or CISEC regulated entities. So I'll leave it here, and I'm going to ask my colleague Maria just to take us through, because without recognition of our efforts, then it's like we don't feel rewarded. So, Maria.
So I'll be quick and just say that whatever we've described took a lot of effort and continuous commitment to reach at this point. And we are happy to see that these efforts have been recognized by various authorities and credit rating agencies and government officials and even the press. So on slide 16, you will see that we've been rated in an investment grade by Fitch, Standard & Poor's, and Moody's. We've been positively assessed by Manival in the reassessment of 2023. And 37 out of the 40 sections that they checked, we are rated in the top 2 rankings. The 3 partially compliant sections relate mainly to NGOs, the framework for correspondent banking, and the powers of the law enforcement agencies. And therefore, we see here that no weaknesses have been identified in relation to the banking sector. So, Simos, you can go ahead and mention some of the press impressions, and we
Thank
can
you,
end it
Maria.
here.
Thank you for having us here and giving us this opportunity. Maria has covered the recognition Cyprus received from the EU institutions, the rating agencies, as well as the Manival. And over the next 5 minutes, I will press to finish within 5 minutes, so to leave room for questions. We will cover the recognition Cyprus has received concerning the adherence to the sanctions. And as my colleagues mentioned before, Cypriot banks are fully adhering not only to EU, UN, but also to OFAC and UK sanctions, regardless of the currency. The next slide demonstrates that the de-risking and disassociation of Cyprus from the Russian market started when before the invasion of Russia in 2022 and the imposition of sanctions. As a turning point, it was in 2018 where Marios mentioned that the Central Bank of Cyprus has introduced the share definition company, but also the same year it was the publication of the Putin's list, where Cypriot banks, we adhere to the Putin's list, where the combination of the two led to decreasing substantially the Russian exposure of Cyprus into the exposure of Cyprus banks into the Russian market. And as such recognition came by the Deputy Assistant of the U.S. Department of State, where he praised Cyprus for its continuous efforts to improve oversight in the financial sector, reducing the activities of the shell companies, and raising standards to effectively implement and enforce the sanctions. The relationship between Cypriot banks and the U.S. Embassy in Cyprus has developed into a partnership where we receive all the support, including training. And they mentioned that last week we had a training where U.S. Treasury, U.S. Justice Department, OFAC, they came to Cyprus for 2 years, 2 full days, where we the seminar was organized by the independent advisor to the Defense Department, Mr. Hugh Griffiths, where he also praised Cyprus about the efforts and the steps we took in combating and addressing the sanctions. As a matter of fact, this, let's say, partnership between Cyprus and United States, this week there is another delegation from the United States, from the IRS Criminal Investigation Department, where they are visiting Cyprus in order to provide training for financial investigation and forensic accounting to the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Justice, as well as the Cyprus Police. So as banks and as Cyprus, we are getting and we are receiving the support and the training we need in order to cope with our work. And then the next slides very simply state some recognitions for the major Western media. So I think we cannot go through details, and since the time is running out, I stop here.
I will put a link to your slide deck on our website so that people can see all of that. But I thank you for understanding so that we can have some questions and so forth. Marie, did you have something that you wanted to say to wrap this up, or shall I move to questions?
Okay, well, we were just going to wrap up what we said, so it's better if we go ahead with questions. And
Great, thank you. First off, a couple of you in the audience know that one of the reasons I'm so interested in this was that as a U.S. diplomat, I served in Cyprus, and therefore I was interested in the progress that you have made, also because, of course, I retained contacts in Cyprus that were in touch with me, including in the days in 2013, 2014, right? And so this was actually a topic as we look particularly at sanctions throughout, but also then particularly after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, what this meant. And not only did I serve in Cyprus, but I thought it would be valuable to have someone who had been the U.S. ambassador to Cyprus join us for this discussion. And so I'm going to hand the microphone over to Ambassador Kathleen Doherty.
Thank you. It's actually a pleasure to see so many of my friends from my days in Cyprus. I was there from 2015 to January of 2019, and I think I want to first congratulate you on all the progress you've made. It's actually quite astonishing from the conversations that particularly you and I, Marios, had over the many years about your vulnerabilities in the banking sector and all the steps that you've taken and the commitment. So I am retired from the State Department, so I'm saying this unofficially, but I do want to congratulate you on all the progress you've made. I think my question is really about the non-banking and financial investments that I don't see addressed here. Some of the, the issues of real estate, hedge funds, insurance, some of the non-banking sectors, and there's a line in here that talks about where your vulnerability still might be the non-banking financial products. So I'd be curious to see how that is being addressed in the future, because cryptocurrency, particularly in some of these other areas, are the new threshold, the new horizon for money laundering. But then I just want to say thank you, and I'm quite impressed, and I'm glad your story is being told about your commitment.
I'll take that one. Definitely, there are efforts in a countrywide basis. As Marios mentioned, the government is on board on that. And also other associations like the Association of Accountants and the Bar Association. But also through various reforms that are taking place. The framework monitoring the real estate and other financial areas like the virtual currency service providers are being now developed. And therefore, the framework is getting stronger and stronger. Definitely, the banking sector is a lot ahead than the rest of the areas that we've mentioned. But everyone is on board, and there are efforts for enhancements and improvements throughout in all the service chain within the country.
There is one additional comment is that given all this work that has been done by the banking sector, and I've mentioned it in my initial presentation, it kind of pushed all sectors of the economy to have a kind of more coordinated role in implementing their reforms, in carrying out their works. And so that is why today we see that the compliance aspect is everywhere, on every aspect of the economy, and in the insurance companies, and in the funds industries, and also even for real estate. And given the new directive that is going to be issued by the European Union, it makes real estate developers an obliged person for AML purposes, and therefore they will be regulated, and there will be also having their own registries with the register of companies in terms of the beneficial owners of the properties that they do contract and they sell with. As far as virtual assets and cryptocurrencies is concerned, we are more on the conservative side, the banking sector. We do not facilitate any such transactions because we strongly believe that at the moment, at least, cryptocurrencies is not even a currency, it's a commodity. It is an unregulated commodity, and therefore, as a banking sector, we do not support any barter trading. And for this reason, it's outside of our risk appetite, unless there is going to be a full transparency, and then we may consider it enacting.
Thank you very, very much. I'd like to give the next question to Cyprus's Chargé d'Affaires here in Washington, D.C.
Commitment, of the commitment of Cyprus to go for and take really difficult decisions, because being also on the other side of the table, on the governmental one, I can assure you that it's not an easy process. It's an ongoing, and it has multiple layers, including the private sector, the society, the reactions of society. So a lot of changes cannot be done in just one overnight. But your presence here and your magnificent presentation proved that Cyprus had done really, concrete steps. And I can assure you it's not just changes on the paper, legalistic terminologies. It's concrete actions. Because we have a common aim, a common goal of a modernized, agile, effective sector in order to have an attractive Cyprus for investment. Just for a small question, you mentioned the sanctions that you also apply and follow the sanctions from US side. I know from my experience because before coming in the States, I was dealing with the human rights action regime in Cyprus. Just for you to know, in the foreign ministry in Cyprus, we have two departments, one that is dealing with thematic sanctions and the other one with human rights sanctions. I've seen that there are different lists. The EU list, it's what we call open information, meaning that it's information that it can be proved, it can be submitted to the court. US sanctions, on the other hand, they use confidential information. So that means that we're talking about two different schools of thought on sanctions. Does it make on the banking sector, does it create any challenges or how to adopt EU and US sanctions? Thank you.
Yeah, as we mentioned at the presentation, yes, it does create an issue. It creates a legal issue. However, if we take it from a technocratic point of view, we as banks have a huge legitimate interest in adhering to the US and UK sanctions, although we are not obligated from regulation side. And I will explain why. Because what if we do not adhere to any US sanctions issued? That would mean that this gives the right to our US dollar clearing correspondent banks with whom we have a bilateral agreement on an institutional basis to validly stop offering that service to us. Being a Cypriot, you can imagine if Cyprus can operate without any US dollar clearing. We cannot. The second is that the situation can even be escalated even further, and having OFAC or the OFSI designating Cyprus as a jurisdiction as well. And that would be detrimental to the reputation of the country. Therefore, to this respect, either obligatory or non-obligatory or confidential or not, we decided to publicly and openly state that we are fully adhere to the US and UK sanctions, and not only, we actually adhere to the BIS guidance issued by the Commerce Department as well.
Marius?
Okay.
Go ahead, Marius.
Well, if I may add on that, basically the law doesn't cover us to abide by the US sanctions, and therefore we had to take an ownership of this decision to abide for the reasons that Marius explained. And in order for us to reduce our legal risks, we included in our contractual relationships with the clients in the contracts our obligation to abide by US sanctions, so that this would give us some coverage for what we are doing. Also, we have a contractual relationship with our correspondents. So in order to get their service, we need to abide by their rules. So we try to implement the US sanctions on that basis, and we hope that if we come across with any legal challenge, we will manage on that way. Up to now, nobody dared to proceed legally, but you never know.
I was about to say, just to conclude, the latest, let's say, policy of the U.S. Department of Treasury to give information about the reason for designation is very, very helpful for us to better understand why a foreign national may be designated by the OFAC. So confidential information may exist. However, there is information sharing there that we can exploit and understand about the reason of designation or even understand the seriousness of a designation that is being carried out. And as for the legal background, and as I said before, the new executive order makes it very, very clear for us that if we don't abide to OFAC sanction, we are losing our correspondent lines, which at no case we want to jeopardize that relationships.
So I want to open it to the room. We have basically time for maybe one more round. So, and we have a question right down at the end. So press the mic, you're on.
I have just one brief question. How do you deal with those accounts which belong to Ukrainian oligarchs who are officially Ukrainian citizens, but some of them collaborate with Russia, with Putin regimes? Do you need special information about this? Or how you proceed with their accounts? Because some of them using Ukrainian passports actually work for Russia. Thank you.
Yeah. Essentially, the treatment is identical to how the policy for Russian PEPs is being implemented. We have zero appetite on those persons and entities, and I believe that the Cyprus financial system as a whole is not being used by that persons anymore. It's more difficult for financial flows to be happening, and that makes our life easier so as not to see that flows coming into the island.
And as compliance professionals, our decisions and our actions are not driven politically. For us, our actions are driven based on risk. And yes, even Ukraine, even if someone in Ukraine who is not an oligarch or who is not kind of on the Putin side, but is on the side of Ukraine fully, it may still be a high risk for us because these jurisdictions have traditionally been high-risk jurisdictions for us. Therefore, they do belong in the overall high-risk areas for us, as well as all of the other friendly kind of countries that George has mentioned before, like Turkey, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, etc., etc.
If I add on this, a number of Ukrainian oligarchs, they're in the sanction already. However, what Cypriot banks we do is that we value the negative information. So even if an Ukrainian oligarch is not sanctioned, then we have the obligation to establish the origin of its wealth and at the same time consider all negative information around in order to decide whether to onboard or to, if already a customer, terminate. But as my colleagues mentioned before, on this shadow, let's say, Ukrainians, they are not banking in Cyprus.
Thank you so much. I think we have come to the end of our time. And I feel that in some ways, I hate to actually end this discussion. We have so much expertise here, and you have added so much to our understanding of the measures that you are taking. I think the key from this discussion really for me has been the determination to have transparency on sides of this, and when it looks at the various sanctions regimes. This is so important, not only for Ukraine and its fight, but also for all of us to make sure that we are implementing it in a way that is effective, and that goes to the whole discussion of how to make sanctions more effective. So I have to thank you for bringing all of this expertise and all of yourselves to the Wilson Center. I want to thank our online audience for joining us today for the robust questions. I especially want to thank our diplomats, the Chargé d'Affaires of the Cypriot Embassy here in Washington, D.C., and Ambassador Doherty for joining us with their specialized knowledge. Thank you all for joining us online, and we look forward to having you join us at another event hosted by the Wilsons. Thank you.